Hello and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining. I think some people are still joining us too. So as you come in, I would love it if we could get started right away with a little bit of engagement so I can understand where people are coming from and exactly how cold it is for you here in this little winter webinar. If you want to hop into the comments and just say hello, and let me know where you're from, where in the country you're joining this webinar. That would be awesome. I am in Denver, Colorado, and the sun is out, and it looks like it's going to be a pretty nice day, actually, but that's a little bit deceptive. It's still pretty cold here, and I still see the remnants of the snowstorm that caused the Broncos to lose the playoffs in my front yard at the moment. So hope everybody's cozy. Milwaukee -10. Oh my gosh, that is so cold. It's not that warm in Atlanta either. So -6 in Michigan. Wow. Hi, Sandy in Dallas, 38 degrees. Yeah, some of these places that are super cold aren't used to being super cold. So I think that's the challenge, as we all feel pretty cold at this time. Austin, Texas, 40 degrees. All right. You're fine. You're fine. Drew, you're always fine. Drew has the best strategies for how to do things. So if you need strategies, call Drew. Awesome. So, well, I'm so happy that you're joining me for Turning Trust into Revenue, Partnerships Growth Engine for 2026. So, we got our coffee. Let's get into it. So as you probably know, we live in a connection-driven economy. And right now, especially because there is just an onslaught of information out there, more so than ever, we're reverting to a point where people trust people, not ads, not cold emails, not faceless brands, and dare I say it, not long form text on social media posts written by AI. I don't know about y'all, but I can always tell when something's written by AI, and I try not to even ingest it because I'm so worried that my unique content, which I still write all of my own content for myself, and it is all written by me. I don't want to start sounding like AI. And that is because a big part of my personal brand is my voice. And it is how I talk to people. And that's become what I'm known for. So I want to always sound like me. It's pretty important. So why partner? Look, I lead partnerships. So this is a little bit self-serving on my part. I wouldn't be where I am if it weren't for the strengths of my partnerships. But it's not just a way to collaborate. It can be a foundation for growth. And for RepairPal, it was the strength of our partnerships that caused us to get acquired by Yelp a little over a year ago now. And so, I'm pretty proud of what I built at RepairPal in terms of partner ecosystem, with a little help from my friends in the marketing and partner teams here as well, of course. But today's consumers trust people in their ecosystem more than they trust their vendors. And so a lot of times we're even redefining some of our customer relationships as partnerships. And that's an important transition. So what data shows is that ecosystems are going to drive 80 trillion in revenue by 2030, and that strong ecosystems can result in growth that's up to 50% faster. B2B buyers really trust their referral networks. I personally am asked all the time, hey, what tools are you using for this, that, or the other thing? I'm in a professional women's network called Chief. I get a lot of these kinds of questions from my fellow members and from people that I know from previous companies and so forth. That's how we're doing business today. And ecosystem-led companies are 5 times more likely to achieve goals. And these kinds of ecosystems increase innovation, and they can even reduce time to market. And that's because it allows you to understand what exactly it is that your business needs to build, so that you're directly going at your go-to-market strategy and not spending a bunch of time building or executing on strategies that are going to fail because you already know what you're doing. So how do you define partners? Well, here we are at a show sitting in a partner booth. A partner is a strategic approach to working with organizations that already influence your customers. So I'm going to talk a lot about trust today. Hope you like that word. But partners are a source of trust inside your customer's ecosystem. They're entities that shape purchasing decisions. They show up in affinity groups, at OEMs, associations, communities. They're experts, and they're channels where trust already lives. So each partner type provides a different trust point and a different set of opportunities. And so your strategy can be tailored accordingly. So sometimes I see companies try to get a little bit cute about this. And what they're doing is they're defining partners or they're defining everything as partners. They just change the name of their customers to partners. But that's not the right way to think about it. Partnerships are equal value exchanges. So you can redefine your customers as partners in some cases, but then that should be accompanied by a different set of behaviors and a different way of integrating those people into your ecosystem, into your thinking, and into the way that you do business. And we'll get into it here in a minute. But how do you decide what partner strategies to use? I'm curious to hear from anybody here on how you're deciding what partner strategies you're already using, perhaps inside of your business. But when you're thinking about ways that partnerships can be helpful, or what your partner strategy might be missing, ask yourself, what is your business missing? Is it missing, maybe reach, trust, credibility, expertise? Are there certain kinds of benefits, certain kinds of scale? Do you understand what's going on in your industry right now? Do you maybe need a little bit more input around that? Do you understand your competition? All of these things are things that partner strategies can bring you. So who already has what you're missing, and who influences your stakeholder, who you should be talking to? And then you can create a strategy that maps where you're going to get your industry insights, how you're going to influence your ecosystem, how you're going to achieve the right market reach, how you're going to build that trust and credibility, which can be by aligning yourself with trusted names that are already doing what you're hoping to accomplish, customer values, and of course, not to be forgotten, of course, your monetization paths as well. So your partner program should include all of these things, having clear partner strategy, and you can have more than one. And so you can create a program on a page, if you will, that includes all of these things for each type of partner. At RepairPal, we do have multiple kinds of partners. We have our referral partners. Those are the partners that refer business into our shops. We have our alliance partnerships, which are more likely to be industry partners that either want to collaborate with RepairPal or want to directly offer products and services to the shops that we have in our network or to our other partners in some cases. And then we have industry partnerships that really help us to understand what's going on in the industry. And in that category, we not only have other companies like ourselves, but we also have many of the associations that we are also aligned with. And then we have co-marketing partnerships. And these are ones where we're kind of after the same customer. We're not competitive, we're cooperative, or even we can be in co-opetition in some cases where we have some small overlap, but nonetheless unique value propositions that go out to the market. And those have all been really useful strategies for us. So our partner program also includes understanding what our internal dependencies are, who we need to engage. We often have an internal dependency on our product team, for example, and then our product team has a dependency on our engineering team to actually build the things that they imagine. So that's one example of an internal dependency. Building foundational partner materials. And those materials should clearly state your value proposition to that partner. And then also should help to build that foundation of trust that's so important to partnerships. Your partner program should include, how are you going to acquire these partners? Who can influence the partners that you're really seeking to acquire? And so how do you get there? And then onboarding that's centered around enabling your partners to execute. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too. your ongoing partner management and activation strategies, because just acquiring a partner is usually just, at least for RepairPal, oftentimes that's just the start of the adventure. And then the real work begins. So getting a partner to signed is nice, but getting the partner activated is way more important. And a lot of times we continue to build out our partner monetization by going back to our existing partners and saying, what more could we do here, versus the acquisition of new partners. That ends up being pretty important. And then there should be some high frequency communication loops. So building out that communication strategy, or thinking about that early. And some of these strategies could be one-to-many, but they also can be, one-to-one, defining what you're going to do virtually, what maybe you're going to do in person. All of that's important. And then just having a strong industry presence and credibility. And that happens through a variety of different strategies, which we'll also continue to talk about. But hopefully this gives you some ideas of some basics that you have in your own partner programs. So practical tip number 1, be customer centric. Understand how your stakeholder chooses a service or a product. Identify who your stakeholders trust when making decisions, and then partner with the partners of your partners. And so I think building out a partner ecosystem where a lot of my partners are doing business with each other shows that I'm on the right track, because now I'm partnering with people that my partners also trust. And then we start to build out some pretty interesting synergies. So just as one example, which is very public, we're partnered with CarMax, but we're also directly partnered with their Max Care Plan providers. We're directly partnered with their roadside providers. And then all of those entities are doing business together, and we're stronger because we're in all of those different points of connection. And ultimately, what that results in is not just a great partner ecosystem and money for RepairPal and, money savings and revenue share for CarMax and all of their various partners, but actually we can't forget the end consumer who's using all of these services. It's a much better experience for them, for us to be integrated in these ways, so that as they need roadside assistance, as they're using that extended warranty plan, as they're driving that car around that they got from CarMax and having it serviced and having it repaired, that they're having the best possible experience, which affects all of our brands, by the way. So it's not just a matter of, making RepairPal look good. In order for this to work, we have to be very customer centric, and we have to make sure that everyone who's involved in that transaction has a successful outcome with that consumer, so that all of the brands that are affected are all perceived in a highly positive manner. And that's what our partner program delivers on. And it ends up being pretty important for the life cycle of that customer. Also, it just feels good. And I don't want to do things. I turned 50 in 2025. I do not want to do things in my life at this point in my career and my journey. I don't want to do things that don't feel good to me. I want to be very values driven as well as customer centric, because that's what I'm about. And that's how I've built my career. So my practical tip number 2 is to kiss them. And I'm sure you have all heard this acronym before, but I have changed one of the words. I think about it as keep it simple, silly. Because when we overcomplicate things, we are in fact being pretty silly. Partners should be able to easily pass along your value to people who trust them. They should get it. They should understand what it is that you're offering to them. And then you should make it as easy as possible for people to contact you, to get going with you, to understand what your value propositions are, et cetera. As one example, a small example of this effort, we recently swapped out the partner experience on our website. So repairpal.com/partners, if you're interested in taking a look. It was a page that was hosted on our regular production database, and it required engineers if we wanted to make any changes to it. So we swapped that out and we built it instead on top of our HubSpot partner and customer CRM infrastructure, which allows us to make changes as we go along. And we want to highlight different partnerships or list our partnerships in a different way, include different testimonials or post videos, have links to our press, all of that. It makes it simple for us to maintain a hub that has a bunch of different pieces of information that our partners might want to access. And so as a person and as a professional, I'm always looking for ways to continue to simplify anything. Anytime something takes too long, that's a sign that maybe there's an opportunity to simplify. So practical tip number 3 is to identify them. And maybe this is really more like practical tip number 1. It's a great place to start thinking about who your ideal partner is and thinking about personas. And sometimes these are now going to be company personas as opposed to individual consumer or customer personas that you might already be using. And then once you identify who your ideal partners are and how they're behaving, you can start to think about who is influencing your customer earliest. Who do your customers or partners already trust? What communities are shaping their decisions? And then are there small partners that you can test with that are more willing to get into the weeds with you and do some testing or try some new things out so that when you approach that big ideal partner profile, you have your act together. And so, but having those named partners that are really your ideals or that you're working towards feels important. And that's going to help to shape that whole go-to-market strategy. Okay. Tip number 4, we're working our way through them. Get social. So any of you who know me or who follow me on LinkedIn or Instagram or any place, you know that I'm fairly social in the social media sense. I'm also fairly social in the human sense. And I think influence comes from visibility inside the ecosystem. People need to know what I'm about personally in order to know what my company is about, what my partner program is going to be about, what it's going to be like to partner with me. I think it's great for current employees, potential employees who know what it's going to be like to work with me. I want everybody to know what I'm about because ultimately that's what's going to show up inside of the partner program. And I think it's pretty important that any program that you think about, sometimes we get pretty impersonal when we think about business systems and things like that. We start thinking about spreadsheets and PowerPoints and all of that. But it's important to think about how we are human in these processes, how we can be generous and be present. And ultimately, and not to get too highfalutin on you, but this is who I am as a person. That's what I want to offer to the world. I feel like I'm here for a bigger purpose. I'm not just here to be a talking head that sometimes shows up on a Zoom video screen or who makes a social media post or who leads a webinar about partnership tips. I'm here to offer something to the world. And the only way I can do that is to be present in the world and to show up. So that does keep me on the road quite a bit. You might find that your own strategy allows you to be a bit more virtual or that maybe your style demands that of you, or you might have a lot of operational responsibilities that keep your tush in your seat more often than not. That's okay too. There's all kinds of ways to show up. That's the beauty of the time that we live in, is that there's a lot of different ways that you can show up and that you can get active and be present. But the most important thing is being available to create those connections and showing what you're about, as well as being about it as often and consistently as you possibly can be. So partner marketing is pretty important. I do lead both our partner and our marketing teams, and I feel like it's a really great synergy. And partner marketing is really about co-elevation. It's not really as much about campaigns, although it ultimately does roll into campaigns at the end of the day, oftentimes. But we want to think about how we can be content rich and value first. And sorry about the barking in the background, but I do have an unleashed dog on my front yard. So that's likely to drive my dogs nuts. Now you know a little bit more about me. But your approach should be content rich and value first. You should borrow trust through your partners' voices. So how can your partners help to amplify your message and vice versa? You want to position yourself and your team as industry connectors, help to elevate your partner or your partner's customer stories, because ultimately as adults, that's what we connect to the most, our stories, and creating a really inclusive partner ecosystem. And then what I like to say is I have a lot of princes and princesses among my partners who I am really honestly so fortunate and blessed to partner with. But you do have to kiss frogs. So I end up in a lot of meetings talking about a lot of things that don't really affect me so much. I remember I had a lovely moment of connection toward the end of last year with a gentleman who has a very specific kind of test strip that he offers to shops to test fluids in cars. There's not really so much for he and I to do together, but boy, I learned an awful lot about test strips in about 10 or 15 minutes. He learned more about RepairPal. We have a positive connection. I never know where someone is going to end up or what might happen in the future. There might be something for us to do together, but he now understanding what I do and me understanding what he does. If there's any opportunity for us to refer somebody to each other, we'll do that. And perhaps that's, that for me at least, and hopefully for him as well, that was enough to justify having a half-hour phone call, half-hour Zoom, whatever, and having that conversation. Some folks want to continue that connection. And so I'll see them over and over again at shows or different places where I show up and they show up. I have a meeting with someone like that who has been kind of around the periphery of my network for many, many, many years. I'm going to be meeting with him at NADA, and he's going to tell me the latest about what he's up to. Is there so much business for us to do together? Probably not, but I really value those connections. And ultimately, since I was a little girl, I've always thought frogs are pretty cute, actually. So I don't mind at all kissing them. And again, I think I've said the word kiss in this webinar probably more than any other business webinar you're going to attend this year. So that's winning to me already. And practical tip number 6. So now we're on the other hand, is effective communication. And so that's going to include personalized one-on-one relationship building, clear, helpful partner newsletters. So if you are one of our partners, and I hope you are, or even if you're not, and you just want to get on the newsletter list, let us know. We do send out newsletters a few times a year, and hopefully those are clear and helpful and give you a lot of updates about what's going on with RepairPal and in the industry and with many of our partners. Thinking about doing joint online or even IRL events. And so you remember the picture that I showed you earlier of Kristen and I at Used Car Week. We were sitting inside of a partner booth. We were allowed to carpet bag a little bit there. And that was really helpful for us to have a place where our partners and potential partners could find us and could meet under somebody else's banner. Really, really helpful. And then thinking about what are regular value drops you can do where you're sharing useful information with the people in your network, and thinking about visibility loops so that you stay top of mind. But you don't want to do that in an aggravating or an annoying way. You want to do it in such a way where you're delivering value. And yes, that takes longer. And yes, that takes more work. It's not as easy as just kind of sending your regular, value prop marketing message out every single time. But I think that's important. And of course, what you can see in the slide is listen more than you speak. Not really helpful when you're running the webinar, but in general, I do a lot of listening because I really do take enjoyment and take pride in learning and really understanding deeply what's going on in each of my partners' industry subsections and what their specific company needs and values are. So practical tip number 7, we're talking about success and rewards. So really thinking about what are the success criteria up front and naming those things, giving the partner the opportunity to tell you, what would this look like if this were successful? And then that gives you an expectation too. Are you going to be able to meet your partner's success criteria? And by the way, this works really well with customers as well. When we bring new shops on service, one of the things that the customer success team was trained by me very early on to do was to really get comfortable with the shop telling them what success was. And that allowed us in many cases to do a reset. Because yes, sometimes when you do that, you do hear the difficult message that that customer or that partner is expecting something from you that you're probably not going to be able to deliver. So very early on, we would get shops that would say, well, great, I want you to deliver 50 plus new customers to me every month. Well, guess what? Our program, there are a few exceptions. There's a few shops that do very, very, very well on the program. But by and large, our program does not deliver 50 new customers per shop per month. And so if a shop is coming in with that expectation, even though now I've heard the expectation, now I have to speak to that expectation, it's really, really important to know what those factors are up front. And then you can measure, sort of what's happening in your partner sourced pipeline and your partner influenced pipeline. What kind of partners are you able to bring on as you're doing this? How are your partners impacting your revenue? What are their activation rates? What is their timeline for activation? So what's the time from, sign to onboarding? And what are some of those touch points? Wow. Okay, let's try to say that 3 times fast. Trust, transfer, touch points that you can define with your partners. Make success mutually beneficial. Partnerships aren't partnerships if there aren't win-wins involved. Your partners have to win and you have to win in order for the partnership to be that. Otherwise, if there's too much of an imbalance and both sides aren't seeing value, that's something that's ripe for either lack of activation, lack of engagement, that partner is going to cancel eventually, or you're not going to want to sustain it any longer either if you're not getting anything out of it. So it's very important for both of you to be super clear about what that looks like, and then to work on a joint plan that executes on that. So tip number 8 is to create buzz. Your visibility, and we talked a little about this already, but your visibility fuels momentum. So some other things to consider in this regard are press. So if our partners will allow us, we do press release with every new partner that we onboard. And then when we take significant steps with those partners, we do press again. We want to let the industry know, we want to let consumers know, we want to let both of our sets of customers know what's going on. And we want to do that in a really visible way. I'm always up for a speaking engagement. And that includes, speaking inside of partner companies. I'm happy to do that. I work to speak in the industry. Many of the people on my team do this as well, and are very active, both with the Auto Care Association as well as larger outside of those different organizations that we belong to, speaking at various events, shows, etc., and thinking about then how we can use those speaking engagements to create content or drive snippets that we can then share on social. So it's a very, any of these things that you put a lot of time and energy into and you think, my gosh, how do we have the time? These things are very extendable because once you've done it once, you can take little pieces of that and reuse them in different kinds of engagements and campaigns. Obviously, co-announcements are even better than our own announcements. Joint launches are better than singular launches. Thinking about community roundtables or panels are ways of getting that engagement, and then sharing those results. And that reinforces your role as a source of trust in the ecosystem, because as it's not just your voice, but the voice of many of the people in your community sharing their thoughts, feelings, opinions, you end up with something that ends up being pretty rich. And that builds trust. Practical tip number 9, and I've mentioned this word a bunch too, but I'll say it again, is to be generous. Don't be scared to give first. Yes, sometimes you're going to give and you're not going to get something back, and that's the nature of the game. But me as a leader, I think about generosity as being an essential quality for a leader. And I think if leaders lead with a generous foot first, then they naturally create inclusive environments where a variety of different people, companies, industries can be very successful and can be seen as places where people want to go, where they want to do business. And you do that by sharing your resources, sharing your insights, offering to make connections, sharing your expertise, introducing partners to one another, cross-pollinating across your different ecosystems, building a network of mutual benefit. And once you've given, not being afraid to ask. So that is something that I've had to learn. And on my partner team, Kristen, who some of you may know on my partner team, is actually really, really great at asking, because she knows that she's given so much that she's earned the right to do that. And I've really learned from her in that regard. But yes, generosity, trust, expansion, really thinking about how you can be generative. That is, by the way, my secret word that I'm holding in my pocket. Not so secret now that I've told you, but that's my word for 2026, is just really thinking about how I can be less of a consumer and more of a generative, creative person. And then practical tip number 10 is to just be easy. And this again goes back to keep it simple, but working with you in particular should also be easy, right? So not just your program, not just your technology, not just your implementation, but you. So you should be easy to find. Part of that is being social and visible, as we've already chatted about. It should be easy to understand your value, your materials. How can you make those easier to share? How can you post those online? So, for example, we have a partner success center. And so how can you make those materials, your logos, your press kit, whatever the case may be that you need to share, easy to find and easy to grab? Make it easy to book time with you. I use Calendly. We also use some of the Google Calendar functions that make it easy to see what the calendar availability is. Even internal at work, I have a choice. I could either make my calendar invisible, or I could make it visible to the rest of the company. I make my calendar visible because I want people to see when there's something booked, exactly what that is. Is that a time slot that could be overwritten if somebody really needs something, et cetera. So I try to keep my calendar up to date as well, so that it's just really, really easy to find those time slots, book time. And then when you're engaged with your ecosystem, it's pretty easy for them to find you because you're also reaching out to them. So think about booking links, partner kits, and clear pathways to connection. And so I have talked a whole bunch in this webinar about partnerships and how they've been critical for my company, what they've enabled me to do. Very successful companies generate quite a bit of their revenue with partners. RepairPal is no exception. It's about 65-ish% of our revenue. So we're not quite at Microsoft level, but getting close. And it's been the single biggest driver of new revenue for many, many years now at RepairPal, because customers trust people they already know. Partnerships bypass noise, lower resistance, and really create that success. And obviously, you want to create a very trackable program so that you know exactly how much of your revenue in building is either coming directly from your partnerships or influenced by your partnerships. And really thinking about creating those outcomes. So as one example, we used to have a customer relationship with Consumer Reports. And at one point in our company's history, we decided it would be a great idea to take the contract and to basically escalate the cost on that contract. And we did that. But we did that without understanding Consumer Reports as a customer, without really considering the fact that, oh, hey, they're they're actually a nonprofit, right? And so is this cost increase going to make sense? How are they using the technology that they're licensing from us? What kind of engagement are they getting on it? As again, what is this going to look like to them? And they got pretty upset with us. And so what I did is I saw that upset moment as an opportunity, and we flipped Consumer Reports from being a customer of RepairPal to being a partner of RepairPal. So now utilizing our technology to actually put the weight of their brand behind the RepairPal certified network and say, hey, Consumer Reports user, if you have a need, here is a network you can trust. And so we did that by using all of these different ideas and flipping into a partnership mindset, really understanding what they wanted and what we could achieve. And so then now, therefore, we're one of the very few, at one point, we were the only one engaged in offering a service-related network that's actually featured on Consumer Reports. Yes, they tell you what products to trust, but we really had to work together to build that trust and to flip over that relationship such that they're willing to recommend the shops that we have certified as being trusted places for car repair, which for them is a very big deal. And for us, obviously, too, was a big deal. But that's an example of what you can accomplish once you build that trust and that partner infrastructure. So with that, I can certainly go into listening mode, or at the very least reading mode. If you want to pop any questions you have into chat or into the comments, I'd be happy to answer them. And I am also going to address a couple of comments that we got ahead of time. And so how do you actually figure out which partners are the right fit versus ones that just sound good? That was a question that we got early on. And that question is a good one. And so again, that's engagement. And you've got to be willing to get in it, ask questions, and talk about those mutual success factors to see if there's a fit. And then honestly, we want to do business with companies that have strong values as well, that really want to offer something that's beneficial and that want to build trust with their customers. That ends up being pretty important because our partner's brand reputation also impacts our own brand reputation. And back before we were acquired by Yelp, when we were just little old RepairPal, we couldn't afford to have anything out in the marketplace that was going to negatively affect our brand reputation, because many people had never even heard of RepairPal. So if their first hearing of RepairPal is in some kind of negative association, that just wasn't going to work for us. That would be too big of a hit for a small company to take. So Drew is asking if I can recommend any resources or trainings to help the average partnerships manager think more like a marketer. First of all, Drew, and I think this is true for probably a lot of people on this call, there are no average partnership managers or leaders on this call. We have some extraordinary people in our network. But some resources, yes. So I have a professional organization that I belong to, Chief, and that operates very much like a partnership. I think those networks are very helpful. I think inside of the automotive industry, the Auto Care Association has a number of things that people can join. I belong to Women in Auto Care. I also attend the Auto Care Association Connect show every year. And I think it's just what it sounds like. It's an opportunity to meet other people in the industry and to gain industry information. I find a lot of industry trade shows, and we go to quite a few. So I'm happy offline to package that up and send a list of the shows that we've gone to and kind of what we think about those. And I think those things can help you think more like a marketer. Also, building a social presence and organizing some resources around that. And you do that to start, I think, by following people that you admire or that you like what they're doing in terms of their social marketing or their social presence. And you start to build a repository of those things and those materials as inspiration. Most things in business aren't entirely unique unless you're very much on the leading edge of R&D. Most things are inspired by and influenced by what you already have going on in the industry. So I do not mind at all borrowing rather shamelessly from other people who are doing it right, so that I get my message right as well. How can I get in touch with you? Email works. I have the really complicated email address of Kathleen Long at yelp.com. So that's one thing that works. And also, if someone wouldn't mind posting in the chat my link tree, Sheila, if you wouldn't mind doing that for me, so I don't have to go grab that, that would be great. There's a bunch of different ways to connect with me on there. You can also always look me up on LinkedIn. I'm pretty responsive to the LinkedIn messages I get that aren't just people trying to sell me the latest thing or trying to offer me a loan I didn't ask for or whatever, but my other messages on LinkedIn, particularly from people who are in my network, I'm pretty responsive to those as well. You can follow me on any of those platforms. Pretty much everything I post everywhere, I post publicly, again, because I really do want people to have the opportunity to get to know me as a human being. Any other questions that people are having top of mind here today? Common mistakes is a question that I was also asked prior to this that I think is worth bringing into this conversation. So someone was asking about common mistakes, and I will tell you, and I'm not going to name it because I don't think this is the right thing to do, but I worked for a company previously that had very, very strict guidelines around partnerships. Companies had to be a particular size. They had to have a particular market reach, customer count. They had to be at a particular revenue level, et cetera. And they would not even entertain conversation with companies who were kind of outside of that parameter. It was very, very strict. And so, the first thing I want to do, and particularly I was more junior in my career at this point as well, is I want to understand why things are the way they are. So I engaged with those guidelines for a period of time. But then after that, because I simply can't help myself, I started having conversations, at least with companies who were outside the guideline, letting them know what our partnership guidelines were, and why it didn't match, but what I would be willing to do, engage in conversation. Maybe at one point they would have a large enough market reach, et cetera. In some cases, some companies were running, pretty nascent programs that actually grew to be large programs. But by the time the programs had grown to the size where we were willing to do business with them, they had already solved the problem that we were in the business to solve. So I actually think we would have gotten further faster by engaging with companies that we still thought had, some good success factors in place that were maybe smaller than our target. Because we could have gotten in there early and helped them to grow and grown with them. And then what we would also have is an amazing story about how we had really influenced that, that partner, that customer to grow. And so I think we were a little foolish in that regard by being so stringent. Well, I love this question, Drew. You ask really good questions. Where does my sunny outlook come from? And what's the source of my own philosophy on life? So my sunny outlook is something that I like to say is kind of installed in my base model. And some days it's easier than others. But at this point in my life, I also choose it. So I choose to think about what's good, what's right. And when something is really sticking with me as a problem, because it's not like I don't get irritated, just ask the people who work with me, they'll tell you. And it's not like I don't get grumpy or I don't get upset about things or whatever. But I do look at those as opportunities. Like when there's something that's uncomfortable, there's a learning moment there. And it might be a learning moment for me, and it might be just simply that I'm reacting to somebody else's learning moment or whatever. But I think we as humans have an almost miraculous capacity to do things really, really right or really, really wrong. And I just want to do things really, really right. And so I look for, the best ways of doing that. And when I don't do it right, I try to acknowledge it and own it, and then move forward from it. And so the source of my own philosophy on life, I'm still building that. But I think ultimately it comes down to, a lot of these things come down to having a growth mindset, and really deeply valuing the people and the connections that are in my life. So there was a period of time when I was a kid where I was, well, I don't know, there's a lot of different words you could call it, but I was pretty much a dork. I was a social outcast. I didn't go to school full time until the second part of the fourth grade. So I didn't get socialized with other kids probably as much as I should have. And I was weird. And so I know what it's like not to fit in and not to have those connections. And I know how valuable they are. And I know how valuable having a wonderful, loving community is. And I have never lost my sense of gratitude for that. So really, like you showing up, asking me these questions, engaging, listening to me talk nonstop for 45 minutes. I'm just honestly super grateful for that. And the fact that I have a job that allows me to execute these values and to create partnerships and to allow revenue to come from that and to build value at the company is extraordinary, really. And I do not take any of you or that opportunity for granted. Are there any other questions? If not, this might be an okay place for us to end, but I really hope it isn't the end. I hope it's the beginning of new conversations and new ways that we might think about building value together. And I'm excited to talk to you or connect with you about that. As you'll see in my link tree, my calendar is an open book. Any open slot could be yours. I'd be happy to chat with you further about this or anything else that might be more specific to how we could work together. And thank you again for attending.